Hey guys, I want to welcome you to the weekly Wednesday for the Financial Freedom newsletter, where every week, every Wednesday, we delve into something inspirational, motivational, something excerpt taken from the Financial Freedom weekly newsletter. Wherever you are, if you're listening on Spotify, on iTunes, Google, be sure to click the like, subscribe, share, comment. And without ado, let's get into the show. Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. And I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. I have a special guest today. His name is Parker Harris. He's an entrepreneur. He's got a lot of experience, wisdom, talking about masterminds, mental models useful for an entrepreneur. We're talking, again, this podcast is interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary. I love to cross-pollinate ideas and use them in different areas. So welcome, Parker, to the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. We had connected through Podmatch, and tell the audience, your background, your story, and we'll get started.
Yeah, I think the short version is I was a kid that was really interested in ideas when I was a young age, and whether it was, economics or politics or business, I started just getting involved in things outside of the normal wheelhouse, and it led to some cool opportunities that I almost self-sabotaged for connection. Then started another journey that was more personal development and got into more of a traditional career path, working for a large technology company. Experienced a lot of the pros and the cons of that type of life, and ended up finding something that I really enjoyed doing, that created a lot of value, and made that my professional focus about 10 years ago. And now I'm traveling the world with my new wife, building our business as we explore new culture, before starting the next chapters of our life.
Yeah, and it's what's interesting is we were talking backstage, and we're talking. What's interesting is you started a mastermind modeled after Benjamin Franklin, and that's become your business model mission. But more importantly, is you had made a choice to people that were leeching off of you and sucking off of you. You had made the choice to walk people out of your life. And so tell us about that, and kind of boundaries, and kind of being ruthless about protecting your time and your energy.
Yeah, it's almost like a different chapter of life. There's a lot of acceptance and forgiveness of these days. Looking back on it, I know pros and cons. I was only child, and I had great parents that really wanted the best for me, and were willing to support that and invest into that with their time and with their resources, but still yearned for friend, best friend, and all of these like titles and external, and maybe found that in the wrong places at a certain point in my life. And I remember just waking up and realizing that I surrounded myself with a bunch of people that didn't really care about me and were taking advantage of me, and I had to make some difficult decisions of, moving and walking people out of my life, having some conversations, sometimes not having a conversation, being willing to, be alone in some new choices. And I remember looking around and seeing in this the connection that other people had, and really learning to value that too, and be careful on who I let into my inner circle. I think of it as like curating that group really, really tightly and really closely.
I love the idea where you talked about being alone in certain choices, and basically, creating boundaries, and not everybody is going to agree with your choice, but, at least you can live with yourself and, own your choices. Talking about, because you had created wealth, you had become wealthy, and now you learned how to stay wealthy, stay healthy. What are your ideas around, what successful entrepreneurs do differently?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cliches around learning to keep things simple. I think sometimes smart people can also get attracted to entrepreneurship and in their minds want to like solve complex problems. But a lot of the best businesses, solve maybe complex problems in a simple way. And I think a big part of entrepreneurship is it's more like baseball in that it's like it versus like school in that it rewards people that are willing to embrace failure and like be willing to fail more often than they succeed, and just like playing a game that has like rejection and just these kind of like things that maybe most people don't want to experience. And if I think of a physician, I think there's probably like a lot of situations that they get put in where there's no like clear right answer, but it's like, hey, here's the different options, and based on the decision, the information we have, this is potentially the best option. I think that entrepreneurship, like entrepreneurs and even salespeople, there's a similar mindset in that it takes to be successful, where you're not taking not taking everything so personally, and being more of a doctor in the approach to a sale or in terms of like solving a business problem.
Yeah, it was interesting. We were talking backstage and we were talking about how doctors, they have this kind of linear mindset and this kind of single focus. And, I think COVID really forced them to really wake up and see different things. So, talk a little bit about, mental models, especially entrepreneurship and, passive financial freedom, how entrepreneurs think of these models.
Yeah. So I think the reason why mental models are valuable is because it allows for a significant amount of understanding based on a simple idea. And it's not so much like a like an analogy or symbolism or something. Like it's actually a way of looking at something that can create geometric growth and understanding. And so I think that's important to understand like why mental models are important, because otherwise it can just be like memorizing something, but it's more of like learning how to look at something to to solve a problem, or to identify maybe how to even look at this problem, to create order out of chaos in some ways. And I remember the first mental model I learned when I was, I think, 17, 18 years old, and it was from Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, that seminal like book. And it talks about circle of influence versus circle of concern. Just learning to master that one model, I think, would really like creates a lot of benefit. And then if we start stacking these different, there's a famous model in like wealth building that came from Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's essentially it's like a matrix where you're either an employee, or you're self-employed, or you're an entrepreneur or an investor, right? And then often there's a goal of maybe even being multiple one of those things, not just choosing one. But you can be an employee who also invests. You can be a self-employed person that's also invests. You can there's ways to stack that. And figuring, I think a big part of the challenge in modern society and education is even giving the people a space to figure out where they want to be in these kind of in the value chain.
Yeah, I love that. And what's interesting is because this podcast is kind of cross-pollination of ideas, guests, from all different walks of life. And hopefully, whether you're a doctor or not, is kind of, you take these insights and distinctions and apply it, as a employee, investor, business owner, self-employed. So one thing is, as an entrepreneur, you go through rough times, tough times, you go through really great times. How does personal development relate to success as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it almost is non-linear, in that I've learned this in not just in a personal development way, but also in terms of relationships as well. And it's the ability to like bounce back when things don't really, when a fire starts, or when when fight or flight happens, how do we see our way back into that parasympathetic state and start making decisions using our prefrontal cortex again, and not just being stuck in that, like, again, that fight or flight state, which I think it's it's easy to stay in that with modern society, just the amount of noise that it kicks up and the amount of tools that are used to, create different dopamine hits, or just like to create different stimulus. And so, one of the parts of personal development that I'm most interested in is essentially like trigger processing. It's like when certain situations come up and essentially drops us below the line into that, like, fight or flight state. How do we process that and understand, what happened and what the story is from what happened, and does that story serve us or not? Essentially, like, I think some of this research and some of these ideas go to this idea that most people are living out a story that they wrote somewhere between 5 and 7 years old, and they're not super conscious of that story. And I think once we can take ownership of that story, some really interesting things can happen.
Yeah, I love that trigger processing. And what are, like, you as an entrepreneur, what are important habits that you have? Like, these are non-negotiable. I know some people it's like, meditation. Others it's like cold showers. What are your important habits to keep you successful?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think drinking water is definitely one of them, right? And maybe it doesn't get talked enough about, and just learning to breathe. I think taking ownership of breath is something that can bleed over to different areas of life. I think at the point of the journey I'm in currently, I've been trying to, like, cut back, like remove habits versus add to them,
Mm,
and almost create space for me to flow in and do what I know that I need to do. But where that flow takes me next is usually starting with just long form journaling, like getting really clear about, like I think it was William James that said, I didn't know what I was thinking until I wrote them down, or like until I wrote it down.
yeah.
So I take some time to do that, and then I'll usually meditate from there, and then capture any additional thoughts. And then exercise is something that really benefits me when I do it. And
Yeah.
even if that's 10 minutes, my wife and I did a 15-minute band exercise today because we're on the road right now and not in a gym. But I think it's more of just making it a way of life, making movement and health a way of life versus like a to-do item.
Uh-huh. Yeah. The other important thing that you did was you started a mastermind. And what's interesting is, people are like, oh, I'm already successful. I've achieved this. Why do entrepreneurs need a mastermind? What can they get out of it? And what's interesting is, you had, you started your career at a Fortune 100 tech companies, and you got to know the executives there, and you asked them the advice that they gave to their children, and you realized that you must choose a different path. So tell us about that and how it plays with the mastermind.
Yeah. Before, I think one other habit that comes to mind that I would just recommend is building some sort of reflection and planning, like time, where there's time where, there's in business, there's this idea of like working on the business versus in the business. And I think same as human beings, sometimes we need to be working on us instead of in us. And so that's something I'm also like really passionate about. And I think there's some good tools around, and again, like learning to simplify that so it just kind of becomes a way of living is another great habit.
Yeah.
And I think, this ties well to your question, is a mastermind is almost like a habit as well, in terms of there's a frequency component towards building a successful mastermind relationship. For those of you, for some people that might not have like inherited that term from their personal development, grandfather, this was something that was coined by a few different people, but Benjamin Franklin talked a lot about it. Napoleon Hill talked a lot about them, and then different business titans and inventors also talk a lot about these type of collaborative environments where It's more peer-to-peer and horizontal, where ideas come to life. And scientifically speaking, some people would say it's where change gets activated, where even like the translation of our DNA can be altered in these type of environments. And some people would call it like multiple minds coming together in the spirit of harmony to accomplish like a goal. And so this case, we're working on a holistic framework of business success, relationship success, health success, and also work around fun, like making sure people are really enjoying the journey and having the impact that they seek to create, all centered around personal development. So that's a framework that we created through our mastermind approach over the last 10 years. And quite frankly, it was something that I created for myself because I really needed it and wanted it. I was working hard and I was going to a lot of different events, actually being able to like curate a group of like, those people that I want to have coffee with after the event on an ongoing basis, bringing that group together for regular conversation. A lot of magic happens. A lot of businesses were started and grown and exited, and not just on the business side. A lot of cool things happen on the personal side where people were experiencing a level of success where other people wanted to figure out how they were doing it, and being part of this mastermind was the solution. That really like triggered me as someone that was investing a lot into a lot of different conferences and events and coaches, and to be like, well, like there's something here. And then I was speaking with some executives, and I was able to build some relationships within the company that I worked at by organizing other events for the new hires. And I was able to get to know some people that were in positions that I thought that I would want to get. And I learned, the reality that it's not always greener on the other side. And those positions, have their pros and cons and sacrifice. Sometimes they wouldn't even recommend those positions to me. And so I kind of had to like look at life as if I was living it for the second time, and dangerously close to making the same mistakes the second time as I did the first time, which is from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning book. Kind of had that aha moment where I could see my life going as if I stayed at the company, and I was like, I can't do that, and decided to really evaluate in my life what I was willing to suffer for, and Junto was one of those things.
Interesting. Yeah, I love how you describe how you curated the mastermind, to sort of for yourself. And that's one of the reasons this podcast, I can meet and get exposed to, these great ideas from successful people such as yourself, and, share it and get insights and distinction. How do people contact you, follow Junto, follow you on social media, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's really powerful, like what you're creating and what you've created, and the opportunity that it creates for you, and then also for other people to like be able to learn from the questions. Thank you for having me. I'm fairly active on Instagram and Facebook, and I'm also on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me there. It's Zach on Instagram, and Parker Harris on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And for the audience out there, I hope you got a lot of value from Parker's responses. He's done amazing work, especially with masterminds. Even Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods, they have coaches and masterminds. So do the same, and curate your group, create boundaries, and all of Parker's resources will be in the links and show notes. And with that, thanks so much for coming out to the podcast. I hope you really enjoyed that wonderful, inspirational, motivational piece. Again, wherever you are listening, if you liked it, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. We're on everywhere: Spotify, iTunes, Google, Amazon, Audible. And without much ado, be sure to thank this show's sponsors, and we'll see you next week.